Good morning and welcome back to Time Under Tension. My name is Olivia Gravengard. I am a registered nurse, a health coach, and a professional bodybuilder. I think I did this last episode as well. I'm not sure all the labels to put forward because it is really hard to capture just who you are via labels. But my purpose for this podcast is to share truth and to more or less learn more deeply what I believe and integrate what I feel like I'm learning into my life into more of a teachable lesson, not necessarily to say that what I'm putting forward is the ultimate truth, but just in general to share what I'm learning so that maybe it will help benefit your life or spark a train of thought in your mind that will allow you to continue growing on your journey. Today, I'm going to branch out a little bit. Lately, I've been writing an email newsletter each week, and I record this podcast in accordance to the topic that I covered this week on the newsletter, which I've really enjoyed because I feel like I can expound a bit upon those topics in a podcast differently than I can over an email newsletter. But I love really digging into one particular topic or train of thought and being able to cover it across a couple of different modalities. That said, I have different things on my mind this week than I covered in my email newsletter. And so I thought it would be good to just be transparent and do more of a life update, which is something I haven't done in a long time. If you're just now joining the channel, my background is as a registered nurse. I was nursing in the hospitals full time out of college. And at that time, I was preparing myself as a bodybuilder. And eventually, I competed in 2020. I was able to win my pro card at that time and transferred over to coaching full time, both lifestyle and bodybuilding clients. And since then, I really focused on expanding and growing as a coach to be better for my clients. But in the meantime, I've changed a lot in my own journey. I've moved away from bodybuilding towards wanting to create a more healthy and sustainable lifestyle and foster a life that I actually deeply enjoy, that isn't quite as rigid or structured as is necessitated by bodybuilding, but still has the level of structure that is beneficial to creating a consistently happy and healthy life. What I've learned more recently is that what that looks like is going to change based on external circumstances to some degree. I think that there is value in establishing a routine that you can maintain somewhat independent of what's happening externally. So if you have a lot of different things hitting you at once, you have non-negotiables in your life that you're committing to consistently, and you're saying, okay, no matter what's happening, mountain or valley, rain, shine, I'm going to make sure I drink a gallon of water. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes. Like having non-negotiables with yourself that keep you grounded regardless of what's happening externally. That said, as our lives change, as we take on more responsibilities, as we experience loss, as we go through seasons of growth and change, it's important to understand that our routine may look different and it's okay as long as we're still meeting our core needs. In my life, in the last few months, I've been in a state of, it feels like constant transition. I moved to California in, I think, March at this point. I started a new job as a nurse in a health and wellness clinic doing IV therapy and hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy and all that while still coaching and getting used to living in a new state. Now being single as well and just learning what life looks like on the other side of a long-term relationship. And I don't like to share a lot about my personal life anymore because I transitioned my mindset around social media from being an opportunity to share my life and journey, which is what I did initially. When I was nursing and bodybuilding, I would post YouTube videos all the time, just sharing where I was at in my journey. There was really no ulterior motive to that. other than just wanting to share what I was experiencing and feeling like I wasn't so alone on the journey when I got to explain my process and getting more fire for my process through excitedly sharing what was going on in my life. As I transitioned to coaching full time, it became more difficult for me to share my personal life because I felt like a wall came up. And suddenly, social media became something that was more about my business, more about promoting the services that I offer, more about uplifting my clients and getting to celebrate them, and not so much a platform for sharing my personal journey. But I found that as I leaned into that mindset, I really lost steam for wanting to share anything on social media. I find myself getting really burned out with it. I'll post a few times in a week or over a couple of weeks, and then I won't post at all for a month. And these waves are frustrating to me and have been consistently because I've interpreted it as lack of commitment or lack of a routine or diligence or having a clear vision for what I want social media to be. And more recently, a friend called to mind the fact that it might be worth just going back to sharing my journey again. And that seemed terrifying because it's vulnerable to say, okay, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm doing. And knowing that I'm a leader, knowing that I'm a coach, and so I see myself as a leader for the people that I'm coaching, sometimes I put an unrealistic expectation on myself that I need to have everything together. And I think that there is a degree of responsibility that comes with being a leader where you have to hold yourself to a higher standard because you can't tell someone to live their life a certain way and then go do the opposite. Like that is fundamentally a compromise in integrity. And integrity is my that's my go-to value. Like if I can say one thing about my life, it's that I want to say that I lived with integrity. And so I never want to be a do what I say, not what I do kind of coach. So it can be difficult to say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm experiencing in my life right now. But I also have learned that that vulnerability is really an invitation to connect and to say, hey, I'm human too. I struggled too. My life has been kind of crazy in the past few months, and I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like. And as much as I would love to put on my armor and share this journey when I'm on the other side of it and can say, "Hey, look where I'm at now. Oh, by the way, I was really struggling, but now I'm thriving." I think that that is a safe move. And I think the more courageous move, my word of the month is courage. So this is part of the inspiration here. But the more courageous move is to turn around and go, hey, here's where I'm at in the middle of my messy journey. And I'm still a leader and I can still set an example, but also here's what I'm learning and here's how I'm growing and here's how I'm falling short of my goals at times. When I learned that a 30% rate of failure is optimal for learning, it's helped me slowly reframe my relationship with what I consider failure or falling short of a goal, and to understand that if I'm not ever failing, I'm probably not pushing myself hard enough. And if I am failing, I shouldn't exist in shame about that, but instead I should say, okay, good. This is revealing a vulnerability. This is revealing a weakness. This is revealing an opportunity for growth. And if I'm unwilling to share that when I'm called to do so, then ultimately that is a lack of integrity. That is a lack of being vulnerable in a way that can invite other people into the process and say, hey, here's what it actually looks like along this messy journey of life when you're trying to grow and heal and improve yourself. It's not rainbows and butterflies. It's not just consistently, progressively, step by step climbing up a mountain. In some ways it is, in that you can get 1% better every day, but you might get 1% better in one area and feel like you're backsliding in another area, and your trajectory may be upwards, and that's ultimately the goal. But there's so many missteps along the way. There's so many backslides. There's so many mistakes. There's so many um, potential triggers for shame that we often avoid discussing or ignore or dilute when we look back on a journey, because we can say, oh, I see how everything led to where I am now. But to actually share it in the midst of it, I think is much more challenging and therefore much more courageous. So here we are now that I've given all that disclaimer. I really want to be more transparent about social media. I think it is a tool for expanding coaching, and I love that. And I want to share my clients, and I want to educate on the things that I'm passionate about, and really provide value, and say, here's something that might help you along your health and fitness journey, with your relationship with your body, with a strategy to approach your diet, with helpful tips for movement, with exercise execution tips, but also to say, this is me on my journey and here's what I'm learning actively along the way. I'd love to go back to that because I found that that's where I felt the most passionate about social media in general and sharing my life on it. So, as I mentioned, the last few months have been ones of transition for me. Having moved to a new state, which I've done pretty much every year for the last few years, I'm adjusting to that lifestyle and having set a lot of intentions for what I wanted to accomplish and the kind of person that I wanted to be in a new environment, which has been a really great opportunity to grow in my relationships, to challenge myself with a new job that I've taken on, and to build this life now on my own in a new state, which has been a challenge, but also a wonderful experience. And seeing how God is working through my life every step of the way, and how his plans are always working together for good, even in the midst of challenges and despair and overwhelm and frustration and shame. Just seeing how everything really does work together for good and giving glory back to him. And I think that's the deeper layer of sharing a journey that is most valuable, is to say, this is me in my brokenness. This is me in my imperfection. This is me in my sinful nature as I am. And also, here's God. Here's God showing up through it all. Here's God shaping me into a better person throughout it all. Here's God working all things together for good and for his purposes. And I think that that is getting to live your life as a living, breathing testimony. And that is how I want to live. So I want to do that with more integrity. And I figured the best way to do so is to be really honest about that up front, and to start to share my life more actively again, and be open to what that brings and the connections that that might lead to, and even the disconnections, the people who will say, like, I don't want to be part of that. Like, I was interested when you were sharing pictures of your shredded body all the time, or when you were a bodybuilder, and getting DMs asking, like, why did you quit? Like, why don't you go back to bodybuilding? And no longer having to explain myself for things like that, but to say, like, "Hey, here's where I'm at in my journey now. And if you'd like to come along and maybe also share your journey, I'd love to do that with you. And if you're no longer interested, that's cool too." Like, I'm at a point in my life where I want the people around who want to walk this life together and support one another regardless of what the external journey is, because ultimately it's all about the internal growth that happens along the way, regardless of the arena in which you are growing. So I'm in a state of learning, a state of transition, which I think is probably a constant in life, but there are seasons when that can feel a little bit more rapid fire than others. This has definitely been a rapid fire season. Shaping this new life, learning a new work-life balance with an extra job, learning how to create a life that I really enjoy and prioritize my time accordingly, especially when I have so much less free time available, and the challenges that come with that, and really deciding what is worth my time, who do I want to invest in, what things are actually helping me show up as my best self, what are the things I turn to that aren't supporting me, that are compromising my progress or leading to shame and frustration? And can I face those head on and really get to the root of why I'm turning to those behaviors? So I know all of this is still a little bit vague. I'm not getting into specifics, but I wanted to start with more of an introduction to what I'd like to do moving forward when it comes to sharing my journey and sharing on social media. That it may not be as structured, it may not be as business oriented, but I'd like to get back to just a little bit more of a real life log of what's going on in my journey, and know that that was such a great path to connection previously in my life. And I'm excited to invite others into that process as well. And I know so many people who are burned out with social media, who feel the same and a lot of people who have turned away from using it. And I think that that's an option. And I think that's something I've turned to in the past. But I also see it as a responsibility to have a platform and to say, like, I could use this to share my life and to be really honest about what's going on and how God's working through it. Or I can run away from that and avoid it. And both are valid options, but to me, one feels a little bit more courageous and a little bit more purposeful. And so I'd like to take advantage of that and get back to just sharing what's going on. So those are my intentions moving forward. I'd love to know what you guys think about this. I always love connecting. That's the point to me of social media in general is creating real connections and saying like, hey, we may be thousands of miles apart. We may speak different languages. We may have completely different goals. We may never have run across each other in this life otherwise if there wasn't this like magical world of social media that keeps us all like strangely closely connected despite our divisive nature and our culture, and actually bring it back to a connection point. And I think that connection happens through honesty and openly sharing your journey. So that's my plan moving forward. This little intro back into my life, a little update, and I'm excited to continue sharing moving forward. I'd love to know what you guys think, what your experience has been like with social media. Is it something that's led you to a sense of burnout? Do you feel like you have to put up a front or a particular image? Do you feel like there's a discrepancy between the you that you experience day to day and the person that you're presenting on this very like tailored and manicured platform? And do you crave realness and connection and vulnerability? Where are you at with it? I'd love to know your journey, your experience. You can always DM me on Instagram, email me. I'd love to just connect with you and know more about your journey and also hear your thoughts on what you think about getting back to realness and more of a blog style of social media. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I'm very excited to share my journey moving forward, and I will catch you next time on Time Under Tension.